The year is 1957, and something would occur in Ghana that would send ripples across the continent of Africa. It became independent of Britain, its colonial master, and would no longer bear its former name, the Gold Coast. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the torchbearer of this great feat, gave a powerful and scintillating speech that would set the tone for the independence agenda for many other African countries.
And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. From now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing the whole of earth. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. We are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. See again, we dedicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other countries in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with totally break the African continent. Now, I want you all, those who have hats on, to take off your hats and let the band play our national anthem.
Now, what does the world know of this great achievement? What does it know when it has only smelt the diffused scent of the budded rose? What truly is the independent story of Ghana? The story of the Gold Coast's independence struggle begins in the year 1876. This man, Charles Cameron Lees, as Lieutenant Governor of the Gold Coast, issued the Public Land Ordinance 1876. The statute gave the British government the entitlement to land for public purposes. What made the Public Land Ordinance questionable was that compensation would not be paid for unoccupied land. The natives of the Gold Coast rejected any form of governmental occupation of unoccupied land. They argued that unoccupied land was rather unutilized land. That was because shifting cultivation was a native farming technique in the Gold Coast. So, the fact that land lay bare and unutilized did not mean it had no owner. The agitations of the natives of the Gold Coast forced the British government to find a way around the farming technique excuse. The governor, William Branford Griffith, sought a way to vest land in the Crown without encroaching upon the rights of the natives. He therefore charged Joseph Turner Hutchinson, a local judge, to prepare an appropriate bill. The Land Bill 1894 was therein born. In the bill, forest land, wasteland, and minerals were vested in the Crown. It further stated that concessions to mining companies could only be granted, subject to the governor's approval. The causes of revolutions and revolutionaries forge empires, and so did the Land Bill 1894, for it became the trigger which birthed the father of Gold Coast nationalism, that is, the Reverend Samuel R.B. Solomon, who took up the native surname Atto Ahuma. As of 1894, he was a pastor and journalist for the Gold Coast Methodist Times, but he would eventually part ways with the Methodist Church for his article titled Colony or Protectorate, which, little did they know, that it was a blessing in disguise, for he would go on to found his own newspaper, the Gold Coast Leader, which would be a major voice for Gold Coast nationalism in the early days of its independence struggle. When the bill was first read on the 14th of November 1894, meetings took place thereafter in Cape Coast and Elmina, which were aimed at protesting against it. The kings of Abura and Christiansburg, as well as the chiefs of Cape Coast, Elmina, and Hyman, drafted petitions to the Secretary of State for the colonies, voicing their categorical opposition. The great Ato Ahuma described it in an article in the Gold Coast Leader as a fiery indignation likely to devour the colony. But he was not alone in the battle, as he was supported by the efforts of another Gold Coast nationalist, the bold, meticulous, and innovative James Hutton Brew. In a fierce letter of opposition to the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Hutton Brew stated, "The Gold Coast Protectorate stands on a footing different from that of any dependency of the British Crown. It has not been acquired either by conquest, cession, or treaty, and although the British government has exercised certain powers and jurisdictions, it possesses no inherent legal right to deprive us of our lands, as is contemplated in the proposed bill, whatever it may have done in countries such as South Africa, Tasmania, New Zealand, East Africa, and elsewhere." The final act, which obliterated any plans to enact the Land Bill 1894, was a joint petition sent by the kings and chiefs of Apollonia, Eastern and Western Warsaw, Shama, Elmina, and Secondie to the Secretary of State for the Colonies. His attention was drawn to the fact that Britain itself recognized native ownership of the Gold Coast by law. It turned out to be the final masterstroke, as it put an end to any further discourses about the bill. But that, however, would not be the British government's last attempt at colonizing the soil of the Gold Coast. The next phase may be likened to an artisan cutting parts of many different palm trees and shredding them into strips to make a piercing, well-bonded and united broom. The artisan in this case was the Crown Lands Bill 1897, and the broom was the Gold Coast Aborigines Rights Protection Society. Commonly known as the ARPS, it would become the Gold Coast's most powerful political entity until the 1930s. You see, Britain had not given up its efforts to obtain land for public purposes, which were attempts to colonize the land in reality. Another governor, William Edward Maxwell, who had previously been a judge of the Supreme Court of the Malay States, police magistrate, temporary judge of the Penang Supreme Court, and assistant governor of the Wellesley Province, decided to use the legal devices he had studied in the Malay States as a means of achieving that. He therefore conceived and brought about the Crown Lands Bill 1897. The bill was read on the 10th of March 1897 and immediately caused an uproar in the Gold Coast. It gave the British governor a superior right to take over land for public purposes, created a concession court which would decide land claims from 10th October 1895 onwards, and brought about a land importance fee. What further exacerbated the situation was the provision that native rulers could not grant mining concessions without the governor's approval. Native dissatisfaction with the Crown Lands Bill 1897 naturally generated interest to fight it, as well as British imperialism. As a result, the Gold Coast Aborigines Rights Protection Society was established at Cape Coast on the 17th of April 1897. It had Jacob Wilson Say, a self-made millionaire, as its first president. Joseph Peter Brown, a teacher and scholar, J.D. Abraham, a local chief, and Thomas Freeman, Edward Jones, an agent of the Anglo-Belgium Company, were the vice presidents, whilst Joseph de Graaf Johnson, a local merchant, was the secretary, and James Queggear Agre, the greatest educationist in African history, was the treasurer. The motto of the society was, "United we stand, divided we fall." The society also had prominent members such as the great Ato Ahuma, Joseph Hutton Brew, George Hughes, a local writer and merchant, John Mensa Saba, the first Gold Coast native of the British Bar, Joseph Ephraim Casely Hayford, a leading Gold Coast nationalist, William Esserman Peterson, a member of the Dutch Bar, and many other towering figures. Joseph Hutton Brew, as the voice of the society, declared, "Long ere the white man appeared on the Gold Coast, there were kings, princes, chiefs, and persons in authority so selected, created, and recognized by their people. They owed not their titles or position or authority to any other power on earth." An alliance was then formed with the kings and chiefs of the Gold Coast, and on New Year's Day, 1898, the society launched its own newspaper, the Gold Coast Aborigines. Through their write-ups and articles, the society's leaders dwelt on the importance of a united action and front. They also appealed for local support, as it was vital to their success. In March 1898, Joseph Chamberlain, Secretary of State for the Colonies, got wind of the situation in the Gold Coast. Eager for peace to reign, he agreed to receive delegates of the Gold Coast Aborigines Protection Society. So, on the 24th of May, 1898, a deputation composed of Jacob Wilson Say, Thomas Edward Freeman Jones, and George Hughes sailed for England. The delegates were received at the Colonial Office in London by Joseph Chamberlain, the Colonial Secretary, Lord Roundell Palmer, the first Earl of Selborne, Charles John Wingfield, Sir Edmund Antrobus, and Thomas Cochrane, Member of Parliament for North Ayrshire. At the meeting, Edward Hunt, solicitor for the Society, introduced the delegation. He stressed the fact that they represented the traditional rulers' grievances against the bill, which threatened to annihilate their system of land tenure. Corrie Grant, a British barrister whose services the Society hired, also added that the natives were willing to make concessions by giving up land which was truly needed for public purposes. This would be conceded so long as there was no hidden agenda of colonizing native land. The Secretary of State for the Colonies agreed straight away to the demands of the deputation. He said, "I think I can give you the assurance which you wish. I am willing that in all cases where natives are concerned, native law should remain and prevail. Native law, I mean with regard to the devolution of land. And I am also willing that the court, which is to decide upon these questions, should be a judicial court." The deputation secured a win, one which had never been achieved by any colony in the British Empire, one which would grow the power and strength of the Gold Coast Aborigines Rights Protection Society for years to come. On the 16th of November, 1898, the delegates gave an account of their mission in England to Cape Coast traditional authorities, and a few days later, it was reported in an article under the heading "A Great Point Scored" in the Gold Coast Aborigines issue of 19th November, 1898. In the next episode, we shall discuss the efforts of the natives and the Gold Coast Aborigines Rights Protection Society in relation to native representation in Gold Coast governance, the development of local government, and inclusive institutions. For now, it is goodbye, and see you next time. From us at Verity Africa.